Hey guys, welcome back. It's Dante Ferrigno at Ferrigno Freedom Channel. I'm glad you're here. I'm here with Sam. He's asleep over there. Bria's on the bed. You just can't see her. She's off on this side closest to me. But yep, that's my dogs and that's me. I am here to do another review today. And I want to take a look at a video that popped up in my recommended here recently. And let's see, this is a 2-year-old video by Dr. Jason Fung called Fasting and Blood Glucose. Considering the fact I've been doing this fasting thing now for 2 weeks, this is my third week that I'm into it. I am currently about 30 hours into my fast. And by the way, I'm sorry I didn't shave today. I have not had time to do anything. I've been doing yard work. I washed 3 cars today. I've been trying to get the grill ready for tomorrow's recording. And not tomorrow, but Sunday's recording. And I have just had my hands full all day today. I got to go to work this evening, and my wife needs to get me out of the room quickly, so I got a lot to do in a short amount of time, and I figured I'd just shave afterwards. So please forgive me for not looking my best for you. uh, let's see. Let's go ahead and bring this video up and take a look at it, because fasting and blood, he calls it fasting and blood glucose, but the thumbnail says how fasting increases blood glucose. And that's what caught my attention, because what I'm trying to do is make sure that my blood glucose and my ketones are in a better level. My ketones have been a little bit higher, eating at random times of the day or all throughout the day or mostly later in the day. And I found that at least my research is showing that you should be pushing your meals closer to the beginning of the day. So I've been eating early as I can, right close to waking up, and then as close to noon as I can for my second meal, and getting through the rest of the day and the night without eating anything on a regular basis 4 days a week. And then 3 days a week I've been doing fasting, 72-hour fast starting Thursday going through Sunday. This is the first weekend that I've been able to start one with my first meal of the day on Thursday. So I didn't have my normal 2 meals on Thursday. This way I can pick up and eat earlier on Sunday. I look forward to breaking my fasts. Of course, I'm going to break my fast with something to kind of lessen the load. I'm just going to have a few carnivore crisps to kick it off, and then I'm going to have me a ribeye steak. So I look forward to my fast. Now, for those of you who have asked questions about fasting, my research has shown that a 72-hour fast is not really enough to worry about refeeding syndrome, but I still use a small 1.5 ounces of carnivore crisps to break my fast, because I don't want to encourage anybody to do a fast where they break it by feasting immediately. I wait 30 minutes after I have a small amount to get my system kind of woken up again, and then that way I can jump right into eating again. Let's see what Dr. Fung has to say about fasting here. I need to grab my headphones real quick. Otherwise, my computer will be fighting for sound with the microphone over here. There we go.
Hi, today we're going to talk about the dawn phenomenon and what happens to your blood sugars while you're fasting. Normally when you're fasting or not eating, you would expect that your blood sugars would go down, but sometimes they go up and people are a little puzzled about it. I'm going to explain why that happens and how this is related to the dawn phenomenon. So let's start with the blood glucose. When you're measuring the blood glucose, you expect that if you're not eating, it would fall, because when you eat, it tends to go up. So when you don't eat, you would think that it goes down. And that's usually what happens. But sometimes people are surprised to find that even when they're not eating, it goes up. Why? The reason is the hormones. When you don't eat, your body is going to release glucose for energy for your body. So during eating, you're going to store those calories, and you're going to store sugar, which is a source of energy. You store it as glycogen in the liver. You can also store it as body fat. When you don't eat, your body then has the ability to take the body fat or take the glycogen in the liver and turn it back into glucose or sugar and pump it back out into the blood. And that's the reason you don't die in your sleep every single night, because we have this storage form or reservoir of energy. And energy is often in the form of blood sugar or blood glucose. Think of it like a refrigerator. When you go to the supermarket, you can get food and you can put it on your dining room table. But you can also put some of those groceries away in the refrigerator. Well, you can see what's on your dining room table, but you can't see what's in the refrigerator. There might be lots of food in the refrigerator, or there might be none at all. So if all the food is gone from the table and you don't go to the supermarket, you might think, wow, there's no food left. But if there's still food there, where did it come from? Probably you got it from the refrigerator. If there's nothing in the fridge, then of course there is no food. The same thing happens with your blood glucose. You have sugar in the blood, but there's usually too much of it when you're eating. So your body's going to store some of it away, just like you store some of those groceries in the refrigerator. And when you don't eat, your body's going to signal through its hormones to start releasing some of that glucose back out, just like you might take food out of the refrigerator.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I started doing this, is I realized that, eating a lot of protein is going to cause your liver to produce a lot of glucose, and that glucose does get stored up. As I started checking my blood glucose and ketone levels before I started fasting, I was surprised to find out that my ketone levels were often below 0.05 or below 0.5, which is not in ketosis, even though I'm not eating any sugar. And my blood sugar was often between as low as 60 something all the way up to 90. It hasn't gone above 100 that I remember. I think maybe once it went over 100 in the dawn of the morning. The dawn phenomenon was going on, and I had eaten late that day before. But generally they run in a pretty decent number. But when I'm not taking in a lot of glucose and ketosis is kind of my goal, I want to be able to try to regulate those blood sugars. So I figure using up some of those stores of glucose would be a good idea. And so far it's worked great, because it's helped me to produce a lot of ketones, and it's helped me to be able to give energy to the cells that, 48 years before I started eating this way, even though I've been eating this way close to 3 years now, I had done a lot of damage to my body with insulin resistance, eating all the sugars and the breads and the carbohydrates and all of the seed oils and the ultra-processed garbage that's out there. And all of that causes a lot of buildup of issues. So I'm still working through those issues, even after close to 3 years of eating a carnivore way of eating. But I started to pay attention to some of the other carnivore doctors out there who were pointing out some of the important things about glucose and ketones. And I realized that those cells need those ketones when the glucose can't get in, because it'll help the mitochondria to repair and to heal itself, so that you're not losing mitochondria and you're having cell death because you're not getting enough energy into the cell. That mitochondria is the powerhouse for the cell, and if there's no juice in there, there's no energy in there for the cell to be able to grow and be strong, then it's going to start to fall apart and die. Well, ketones don't need insulin to give the okay to let glucose in. If I said that right, insulin is there to tell the cell to let glucose in, but it doesn't need insulin to tell it to let ketones in. The ketones come whether they like it or not. So when you're in ketosis, you're going to be fueling those cells with the energy that they need, while you're also battling that insulin resistance. You're bringing that glucose level down. So let's hear what he's got to say more about this raising of glucose, because so far this is stuff that I'm mostly familiar with. And though you may not be, the dawn phenomenon is a common thing. You wake up early in the morning, around 5:30 in the morning, your blood sugar starts to spike even before you wake up. And for a couple of hours, that's where your blood sugar is going to be higher. And that's one of the reasons why Dr. Boz, for instance, talks about eating earlier in the day, because if you're avoiding eating during that cycle, which I had been doing for a long time, you're getting a blood sugar spike in the morning, Then when you eat in the afternoon, you're getting a blood sugar spike. And then in the evening, you're getting another blood sugar spike. So all throughout the day, you've got blood sugar spikes. You don't have any time for your blood glucose to come down and your ketone levels to come up and start doing some of the healing that's necessary to overcome that insulin resistance.
Hormones are known as counter-regulatory hormones. So they're called counter because they run counter to insulin. When you eat, insulin goes up. Your body wants to store that energy. When insulin goes down, when you're not eating, other hormones go up. So these hormones are noradrenaline, the sympathetic nervous system, and growth hormone and cortisol. So all of these hormones go up, and they have the effect of taking the glucose that's in storage and pumping it back out into the blood. During fasting, you also have a rise in counter-regulatory hormones. So when you're not eating, your blood glucose may go up because the body has now the signal to start taking out the storage glucose, and it's going to go up. This is also seen in the daytime, first thing in the morning, which is why it's called the dawn phenomenon. The dawn phenomenon happens in everybody. People, when they just about to wake up, somewhere around 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, the body, because of its circadian rhythm, releases a surge of counter-regulatory hormones. And what it does is it takes the sugar from your storage systems, pumps it out into the blood, and gets you ready for the day ahead. That's why you don't have to eat first thing in the morning if you don't want to, because your body's already prepped you up and gave you energy to get going. The whole dawn phenomenon is actually normal. You can measure this in normal people, but usually the rise in blood glucose is very small. In some people with type 2 diabetes, what they find is that the blood glucose rises very high in the morning, even though they didn't eat. And this is a variation of the response that you get to the rise in glucose when fasting. So if you find that your blood sugar is rising when you're fasting, there's nothing wrong with you. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means that your body is releasing a lot more glucose, probably because it had a lot of glucose stored away. Just like if you have a fridge that's filled to overflowing, once you get that signal to take some food out, you're going to take a lot out. So that's what the body does too. When it gets those counter-regulatory hormones and gets the signal to release glucose, it releases a lot and the blood glucose goes too high. The other question about blood glucose sometimes I get asked is whether or not fasting causes low blood sugars. And the answer is no. Your body has the ability to keep your blood glucose in a normal level no matter how much you fast. And that's because it can turn the glycogen in the liver or the body fat back into sugar. In extreme cases, it can also take proteins in your body and turn that into glucose as well. That's called gluconeogenesis. In a person who takes no...
One of the things that I've found that people worry about when fasting is losing muscle, and that's kind of what he's talking about there, where gluconeogenesis will start to break down protein. Well, protein isn't found in your muscle cells, but your body is going to prioritize storage, especially if you're using your muscles. I still do my exercises, and I do a lot of yard work, and I do a lot of working while I'm fasting. Blows me away that I can do this. I would have thought, from my experiences when I was younger, when I am working, I work up an appetite. At least that's sort of the psychological side of it, is I feel like, man, I got to get something to eat before I go work because I don't have any energy. But I found that I have a lot of energy when I'm fasting. I've been extremely productive on the weekends when I'm fasting. The very first weekend I did this, I went to see an NFL football game, and we were parked so doggone far from the stadium, I had to walk. We walked back and forth to the car 2 times during the trip, and altogether I put in about 8 miles that day walking around the stadium in the Miami sun because it was a Dolphins game, and I had plenty of energy. I didn't even drink as much water as I thought I would. I drank a lot more water the last time I went to a football game, and at like what is it, $10 a bottle, $5? I forget. They're ridiculous how much they charge for water. And they don't give you any water fountains anymore. I don't know what happened to water fountains at stadiums. I understand we've had all this craziness with 2020, but come on, people, bring back the water fountains. People need to get some water. But I found that I had plenty of energy, and that blew me away. But you've got to keep those muscles working, because your body knows if you're kind of shutting down, if you're getting into rest mode and you're doing a lot of fasting, your body will start to cannibalize your muscle cells. So you want to keep those muscles moving. You want to keep working as much as you can. You don't want to make it a slowdown period. I think there's a tendency psychologically to say, I'm going to be fasting. I need to take it easy for a couple of days. That's exactly what you don't want to do if you want to prevent muscle loss. At least that's what I've been able to glean from the research that I've done. Hopefully he'll cover that.
Medications for diabetes, they should never really develop low blood sugars in response to fasting. On the other hand, if you are taking medications for diabetes, remember that during fasting, you're allowing the body to use up some of the body's glucose. So, as it uses the blood glucose, you
don't always have to listen to them, but always talk to them. At least get their advice, especially if you trust them. You know, I personally have very little need for doctors anymore. But, you know, some of these doctors, like Dr. Fung and Dr. Boz and Dr. Baker and Dr. Berry, they offer some great information because they've helped me get healthier than anything else I've ever listened to from any other doctor I've ever had. And thankfully, I have a new doctor who is a little bit more open-minded to things, and I'm hoping to see some good things from him. As a matter of fact, he's the one hosting the big event that's going to be going on the day you see this video. If you're watching it when it first comes out on Saturday, I will be at the health seminar that Dr. Baker is going to be joining, my primary care doctor who put on this event for a sort of a health awareness type of thing, where they're looking at a lot of the things that are not being looked at in the healthcare industry. They're looking at what's in our food. Why are we getting sick like this? Is it the diet that's causing it? Considering carnivore, the fact that they have Dr. Baker there says volumes just right there. So it's a good thing to have a good doctor, but I also understand a lot of you guys have become very jaded by the medical system and the healthcare system, and you realize that it's starting to look like a racket. I can understand why you're hesitant to want to talk to your doctor. But as a person on YouTube, I certainly can't ever suggest that you don't take into consideration a medical professional's opinion, because I would be stepping out of line for the YouTube guidelines for one, and even if it's what I believe, I still have to be careful with my audience, because I'm willing to risk my body and my health to do things that I think might be a little bit renegade, but I'm not willing to risk yours. So I always want you to take into account what your doctor's saying and make your own decisions.
You're also taking medications to lower that blood glucose, it can actually go too low. And that's why it's really important to talk to your doctor anytime you change your diet to make sure that you don't need to make adjustments to your medications. Some people think, well, that's a reason why type 2 diabetics or people on medication shouldn't fast. But that's not exactly true. It just means you need to be careful when you're fasting, and if your blood glucose tends to go too low, then you need to reduce your medications. You're over-medicated. But remember, when you're reducing your medications for blood glucose, that means your diabetes is actually getting better. So that's a good thing, not a bad thing. It means you need to adjust that medication. Many years ago, they did several studies looking at the question of whether fasting itself could cause low blood glucose. And it was a very interesting study because they took men and they fasted them for 30 to 60 days. And then not only that, but they gave them a large bolus of intravenous glucose to drive that blood glucose down even further. In this study, they gave 3 people who had a long fast 20 units over 24 hours of insulin. During the fasting period, you could see that their blood sugars were fairly normal. 5.5 to 4.5, pretty normal. But with that medication, they were able to drive that blood glucose down to about 0.9, which is a level where we get really nervous and often people get seizures. But interestingly enough, the people who were fasted did not even feel a single thing. They're completely asymptomatic. They felt normal, even though their blood sugars were really low down, so low that we'd probably put them in the ICU. Why was that? It's because they had a lot of ketones. The ketones are a source of energy for the brain, and they go up during fasting. When you're fasted, your brain is mostly using ketones, so even if the blood glucose goes down very low, well, that was a small proportion of the energy that it needs, and most of its energy is coming from ketones anyway, so therefore people felt very normal. So yet another reason why the body is able to tolerate those low blood glucoses even better while fasted. In this other study from 1972, they did something very similar. They took 9 people and put them on a 60-day fast. And then they gave them, once again, intravenous insulin to drive that blood glucose down, just to see what would happen. And in fact, every single one of them didn't notice anything at all. Those blood glucoses dropped down so low that it was almost unmeasurable in many cases, yet people felt completely normal. So remember, in terms of the blood glucoses, while you're fasting, usually it's going to go down. Even if it goes down, it usually stays in the normal range. If you're on medications, you need to make adjustments to those medications and speak to your doctor. And if it's too low, then you may need to stop it completely. But in most cases, it's not going to go so low that you're actually going to feel it. Sometimes, however, the blood glucose goes up during fasting, and that's not abnormal. And what you need to understand is that what it indicates is that your body probably has too much glucose overall, so the fasting is doing a good thing. What you're doing is you're allowing your body to release the glucose into the bloodstream so you can use it. It may temporarily go high, but that's just glucose that's coming out from your own body anyway. It's just a chance for you to use it. So you actually are doing the right thing. You need to continue and keep going until you get that blood glucose back down. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you learned something. If you did, please share it with somebody. They may learn something too. And if you could do me a favor and hit that like button so that other people can.
Will do, Dr. Fung. I'll be glad to share it with everybody right here because that was a very good video. I found it to be very useful information, and hopefully we're going to see some changes in the way my blood sugar numbers look afterward. But I'm also looking to see some changes in body fat storage in areas that have been trouble areas for me, and then also to see some loose skin, which is the same trouble area because that's where I carried all my weight before. I lost close to 100 pounds or over 100 pounds, depending on when you start measuring. I mean, I was up to 302 at my highest, and I was 187 this morning, which is a little more than I was after my last fast, but I expect there to be fluctuation. I don't like weighing myself every day anyway because there's too many factors that can affect your daily weight, and looking at the scale every day can not only be demoralizing, but it can be misleading. It can make you think that you have a problem or that you're gaining weight when you're not actually gaining anything. Your body is fluctuating with the amount of fluids that are in it and the amount of fat, the amount of muscle, all of those things play a role. So before we go, while I'm in my 30th hour of fasting, let's go ahead and take a look and see where my blood glucose level is. I'm using a Keto Mojo test kit here. It's one of the interesting things that has happened to me since I've been doing this way of eating is I don't bleed very easy. And the blood banks want my blood. I tell you what, they keep calling me, asking me if they can get me to come donate some more blood. So my glucose is still 75, which for somebody who's been fasting for 30 hours, I still think that's a little bit on the high side. But that just means, like he said, I've got more glucose in my system than I need. So this is a good way to get through that process. Hopefully we'll see some real changes as I continue to progress. Now I'm going to check my ketone level and see how we're doing there. Usually I like to wait until the last day of the fast. Come on, baby. There we go. Bria does not like this beeping. Ketones, ketones, come on, ketones. 1.8, that's not terrible. I'm happy with that. That would be, I guess, like mid-level on a keto stick. I'm not really sure how the numbers translate to what you would see on a keto stick, where it's like trace, small, medium, heavy, or whatever it says. But I know anything above 0.5 is ketosis. So that means my brain is using a lot of ketones right now for energy. 75 on glucose is not bad. It's not high. It's not low. So, but it's just showing that those ketones are there to start doing, to power those cells where the glucose isn't. And hopefully I'll start to drain out some of that extra glucose that I don't need, Looking forward to seeing how this study comes out. Some very useful information from Dr. Fung. If you guys have any questions for me, I'll be breaking my fast on Sunday morning, and who knows, I may do a live stream. It might be something I record. It just depends on how it goes. It's kind of hard to do a live stream when I'm trying to eat food and all the other stuff, but we'll see. I'll see what I can do. Until then, you guys have a good Saturday. I'll see you next time.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?